Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is Yari Dodenko, and I here have Dave Putz from JKP Holdings. Today, we're going to be talking about some informational, dropping some gems, making sure that you guys get some great content from us. Due diligence on senior mortgages, right? How does it work? What it is, and so forth. So, Dave, we were just really talking prior to this. So, for the people who might not know you and the people who are joining us, who are you? What do you do? What do you specialize in? What kind of things should we be looking forward to today's presentation?
Sure. Dave Putz, JKP Holdings. I came from the rental market world and pretty much got out of it dealing with the headaches and craziness the tenants have involved, and shifted in 2010 to this thing where we're looking at short sales, and came across notes. We then learned about what they were and how we were able to get access to properties that aren't on the MLS and whatnot. Dove more into it. Started a hedge fund, which we're buying thousands of loans, and then went on my own in 2012. So what we learned was buying first position mortgages was a great avenue to get same kind of situation with rentals, but without having to deal with tenants, toilets, turnovers, this and this. So it eventually went on, and we built a private equity fund, which we were buying first and seconds at times, not performing and performing first position mortgages. Those turn into situations where we can turn them into performers, or we foreclose on it, and then we end up taking the property back, either renting it, selling it, or whatnot. And all different exit strategies that were not available to us when we were doing the rentals. And the
Got it.
passive income was amazing.
Got it. Okay. So you transitioned, and how long you've been doing this, and how long you've been in the business for? Uh,
Sure.
so since
For about
2012, right?
Yeah, I started buying in 2012. In 2010, I was working for the fund, just doing preliminary valuation of properties across the whole country. For about 2 years, I was doing property valuations, area valuations, talking to agents. And 2012, started buying my own first notes. Probably starting off with a lot of people are with a couple of $1,000s and getting into it, and then seeing the returns and seeing buying an asset for 5 grand and a year or so turning into 60, and like, whoa, this is awesome, and not dealing with anything and not even leaving my house and not dealing with hammers and nails and property managers and whatnot. It was pretty cool.
How'd you come across this venture of yours that you currently
Sure.
focus?
So in 2010, a close friend of mine, Jack Kirby, had started a fund where he asked, some childhood friends to check this out and try it out and help him out, which I learned from. And he was buying thousands of loans, and I was just doing due diligence for him. And then that's where I transitioned from rentals to notes and said, "Whoa, what's this all about?" And in 2012, I broke off and started buying my own stuff because I saw the profits he was buying. Because back then we were buying at 35 cents on a dollar,
Right.
where brick and mortars were still around 50, but we were buying it significantly cheaper and getting amazing returns.
Right. So 2008 happened, right? There was a lot of problems, I would say, in the economy and the way things were being
Yes.
done, mortgages being approved, and appraisers that were appraising things that didn't make any sense. So there was a lot of interesting things happening. So 2012 was kind of like the bottom of it all. I would say maybe kind of a curving going back up. And that's when you jumped in. You kind of
Yep.
learned business through third.
Yep.
You worked with somebody else. You did
Yep.
the due diligence, so you actually got all the experience possible on other people's
Yes.
time while getting paid for it, which is amazing. I
Yeah.
strongly recommend everybody to kind of like, yeah, figure it out, or
Yeah.
get your experience in through other people's mentorship, meaning like, make
Yes.
sure that you have somebody that understands it and does it. So you got that out of the way, you got all the information. So what does that mean, due diligence, when you were doing for the company that you were working for?
Sure. So in brick and mortar worlds, you're doing comp evaluations, assessment of the property, if it's a fix and flip, or for rentals, just assessing
You
what
broke up.
oh, assessing the value of the property, right? So when you're doing brick and mortar fix and flip, you're valuing not only the property value but the repairs needed. Rentals, you're running your valuations, but you're also seeing out what your net return will be based on the property condition. What we found was that with notes, we're doing some of that, right? Valuing the property, but it wasn't diving into the the repairs needed, because I was not buying the house, I was buying the debt on the home, which
Yeah.
translate to I have to worry about the collateral file. So now I'm worried about the property value and then the collateral file. So why is a collateral file a big important thing? Well, when you're buying the debt, the instrument is protected by the property. That if the collateralization of the property is bad, I can't go and secure the property because the paperwork doesn't line up, and I can't take legal action.
Mm,
Right?
right.
It shows a chain of connection. So just like rental properties, when you buy it, if the title's dirty, you have to have a clean title. Well, with notes, there's an assignment of the debt moving forward, and you have to make sure that paperwork is correct. Because if not, and you're foreclosing on it, you need to make sure that that chain is correct, or you may not be able to foreclose on that property.
Makes sense, right? And it was specifically in 2008. It's a mess. It was
Yep.
a big mess. There was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of shady things.
Yes, robo signing. Yep.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
So pretty much, tell us about doing that due diligence. What were some of the things that you came across that were really the biggest problem? Like, what do you feel like, and kind of like contributing to the 2008, the collapse? What really happened? What were things happening for people who don't know, for newbies?
So one of the things that first you have to understand is that we in 2012 there was massive quantities of these properties coming out, and the pricing were astronomically cheap. But collateral file is one aspect of due diligence. There's also the value of the property. Now in 2012, we're buying nationwide, so we're not buying in your local area a lot of times. We're buying nationwide. So one of the first steps is difficult is how do you know what Columbus, Ohio, or Memphis, Tennessee, in these small pockets, what these properties are worth?
And
You could jump on Zillow,
yeah,
right? But and a lot of real estate agents, I apologize if you are one, just don't know what a house is valued by the whim.
value.
Where
Yep.
real estate investors can figure those kind of things out. So that was one gamut that I kind of had to solve. And trust agents.
Right. Because they're
So
the boots on the ground.
yeah, most of the time they are. And when you say, listen, what's this property worth? Their answer is it's not for sale. And they just put people together and it doesn't tell us anything. We need someone to do analysis. And we can use Zillow.
Yeah, and now you're buying on the property unseen. Is that pretty much how that works, that industry?
Yes. Yeah, most of the time we're buying property unseen, but we want to get some drive-by pictures, right? Reason being, we bought property in Newark, or we're going to buy a property in Newark, New Jersey, and we found that the property was knocked down. So it went from a house with a loan on it to basically a blank land.
Right.
So you have to make sure that boots to the ground goes to and sees it, and make sure that it's not on the list for demolition. So
Right.
those are the kind of things that shift from buying rentals and fix and flips to buying notes. So you're going upstream, right? Because these aren't available on MLS data, a list pendants data. This is before list pendants lists. This is a specialized list that banks and hedge funds are sitting down to us and be able to either cherry pick or buy in bulk. And you're buying these properties, and then you're doing due diligence. Nice thing about this space is everyone knows each other. It's a very small community. And I can reach out to somebody who's local in that area and just get some local knowledge. And usually they're better than typical agents because they have the knowledge of property values and they know their backyard.
Right. You mentioned like agents. Not all agents are equal. And what does that mean? Is pretty much some agents understand how to work with investors. And what does that mean in reality? An investor needs to purchase a property that the numbers work, right? It's not he's not going to live in there. He's looking to make a profit. He's either going to rent it out or flip it. And how much is he buying for, and what are the renovations? And something you said, you are buying something, pennies on a dollar, but you're also taking a lot of risk. What does that mean? Meaning you're buying unseen, right? That is very risky. And contractors in this business, the riskiest part of it all. They can take your money, they can disappear, and nothing gets done. That's the worst case scenario. So that's why you do have a spread, right? It's very lucrative, but it all comes down to due diligence. And today's topic is due diligence. How do we figure it out? How do we get it done? Because you are seeing it unseen, like that you're buying it unseen. That is very, very scary. Like in my point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what kind of like before we jump into the presentation, what kind of like some of the worst case scenarios that happen to you throughout the process?
You deal with either a problem with the person, the borrower, who will fight you tooth and nail through the entire process. You can walk into a situation where you get the house back, you think it's a great condition, and you find out the inside of the guts are either destroyed. There's a meth lab there. We've had cases where we talked to people who found like airplane wings fall into the roof of the house. Um, all kinds of crazy things happen. Dumpsters and hoarders and whatnot, because you're not seeing inside the property like brick and mortar. I can't get into a borrower's house; they still own the property.
Right.
But we've also caught things where a loan is, a double-sided parcel, and you didn't know you're buying two parcels of land, which is amazing, and most people don't see that. Um, we've also had situations where the lien position moved and changed, and people didn't realize it, or we didn't realize it, and you have to be very wary of what position you are in the county records to make sure it happens.
Right. So let's kind of talk about what is a senior mortgages, right?
Sure.
What does that mean?
So in the county records, there's a record of each lien on the property. So the senior mortgage is the first position mortgage on the property. Now there may be seconds and thirds. Typically, when you sell the house, title comes in, everything gets paid, and title is clean. And then you get a title policy when the new mortgage is created, showing the fact that the property is completely clean. Then they take that senior mortgage, which is the first position mortgage. So if you have an 80-20 loan, the 80% should be usually recorded first, and then the 20% is recorded afterwards, making it a second lien or junior lien, right? So your first position mortgage is set up to be the first one in the county records as a lien order of the money coming out if the property is foreclosed on. Taxes and municipal liens will jump ahead of you, even if it's recorded afterwards, because the laws in the state.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. So pretty much, how do you go about further into the diligence, right? So we spoke about the senior mortgages, and now the whole topic is due diligence. How do we specifically do diligence towards senior mortgages? What is that?
Sure.
The title?
So first thing you're looking at is the data, right? What we want to or what most investors get is what we call a tape. It's a Excel spreadsheet that sends you all the data. We're evaluating the data in there, right? We have bid calculators that we'll calculate everything out. We set our returns, and then we have a bid price based on that. One thing we do. Then we move into the actual valuation of the property, right? So we want to see what that property is worth. ARV after rehab value, basically prime value, and we discount that a little bit, and then we will set that up as a dollar amount that our peak is at. The next step.
What does that mean? Discounted a little bit. What are we talking about percentage wise?
So it depends on the value of the property. If it's a $50,000 house, right, and at value 50, we're going to discount it down to maybe 42,000 as a high peak.
A buffer.
Yep. So if it's 150,000, we may drop it down a little bit more because we don't know the condition of the property. It's a round number. We don't know the details. So we get a value of what we think it is based on data. Then we move on. We run all that through our calculator to come up with a number we're going to make an offer on. Different from typical real estate, our bid number is based on a lot of factors. We make what we call an indicative offer, which is subject to a BPO review, subject to a collateral review. So we make an offer, and everything else is subject to, right? Where you guys have to do all your analysis beforehand and then make an offer. You can't be contingent on checking out the repair needs for the house. You're making an offer based on all the data being correct. And maybe there's a contingency on the loan, where we're doing the opposite. We're actually saying, here's our offer based on data, and everything is after the bid is accepted.
Right.
We're looking at collateral file. Once we get our bid accepted, we're looking at the collateral file and making sure the collateral file has legal grounds to stand on, that we need to make legal action, we can.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, so when you're collecting your data, right? You're collecting the fair market value, right? What is the houses of the current market selling in this area, this neighborhood, this street, right? You really want to be specific. So you are reaching out to agents. You are talking to boots on the ground. How many agents, or like how do you find the agents? How do you know if it's a proper agent? Like, how do you know that the boots on the ground, like you said before, it's very risky. They say one thing, but they don't really understand what the fair market value is. They just know that I need to list this, and then if a buyer comes, I sell it, connect them, make the commission. So as agents, want something you just purely rely on when you're doing something like this, or is there other people involved?
Sure. So what we'll do is we use a service, and we collect a bunch of we call REO agents, those
Mhm.
who've dealt with banks and foreclosures, and we
Interesting.
speak to them. They're more investor knowledge. They understand value. However, most of the time they value it higher than they should.
Got it.
It makes it looks valuable to us. It makes it look good for us. So we use it for dollars. We compare to what we quickly see analysis of what we think the value is, and we compare it to. We send them a list of questions. Is this a rental market? Is it owner occupied? How has the market been? Is this a crime area? How is the condition of the area? Um,
Class of the
yep,
neighborhood.
yep. And typically a BPO is usually an AVM with a bunch of pictures to it. BPOs are done typically by a BPO agent who will do 100 a month, and then they just manufacturing them out there, and most people don't combat it. So BPOs kind of become pointless at one point. But we get those numbers together, and then what we do is we send them to the seller as our bid number, and then we dive into it. So if the seller says, nope, I'm not accepting it, we're not diving in anymore. However, they accept it, then we're going to call up. We get a list of the agents. Maybe we email 15 agents in the area, and
So
we call back.
speaking about agents, so you said you email 15 agents, and you spoke about agents who are familiar with REO. Are you just kind of like calling all the agents saying, "Hey, are you familiar with REO?" Or is it like you're looking at sales that were done and seeing what kind of transaction it was? How are you finding these agents?
So we have a couple different sources that we pull down REO experienced agents. There's classifications for realtors that have this dynamics. And then we also have our own director agents that we've come across or friends have told us about. But we use that data, right? Networking. And we use that data to find out what agents are in the area and what we can use. And then we reach out to them. And if 3 get out of 15 get back to us, we're going to speak to those 3, make our offer, and we're going to come back to those 3 and listen. Are you at all in the area? Can you take a quick picture for us? And they often come back with, sure, I'm in the area tomorrow. I'll take a couple pictures for you. And that's how we get a closer view.
Right? Just pretty much the lawn, the house,
Yep.
whatever they can get there.
Yep. And you know what? We've had pictures where there's a guy mowing a lawn, which is great because now it's occupied and taking care of it, which tells us a lot about the property and get real-time photos. And we do use Google Maps to see the street view and satellite to see how the roof is. But those are the kind of things we use to get after we get our accepted offer. The bigger part is the collateral file. Now, the collateral file is the most important besides the value of the property because that tells you if you have legal grounds, if this note's worth $80. So if you have a problem with chain and you're unable to fix that chain, you literally can't foreclose. You have a big unsecured loan. So you need to make sure reaching out to the agents and whatnot.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Makes sense. So when you do your numbers, right? So you reach out to the agents, you're seeing what the fair market value is. Now you are discounting this property to make sure that it's lucrative in a way for you to actually buy and make profit on it. You don't see the interior, right? So you have no idea what the condition is. Maybe there's somebody living there, maybe not. So what exactly is how do you price the construction? Is there pricing of the construction when it comes down to the diligence period of the senior mortgage?
It's difficult, right? It's one of the most difficult parts of this entire process is figuring out what the value of the property is and the repair needs. We have a formula that we've used that kind of takes a knowledge of what we've experienced in different markets, and we take the age of the house. We love to pull more data, but a lot of data is difficult to pull at a county record. But we'll take a house that's worth from 1950 built and know the fact that that house probably needs more repairs, especially if the borrower stopped paying.
Right.
Versus the house that maybe was built in 2010, that house is not going to need as much, right? We used to take an average number across the board, and we found out that to be, bad in certain situations and really good in others. So we started using the year of the house built, and we plug it into our calculator and make that an expense of one of our things. So a house built 1912 may have 25,000, 30,000 of bare minimum repairs needed to get it up to permits, up to statute.
So
yeah, it's crazy. So those are the things I would say that's how we kind of figure it out. A lot of this market is a guesswork because we don't know the situation. But what we found across social medias, which is really cool, is that most people post things inside their house, Christmas trees and whatnot.
Uh,
We've come across like, a 20-year-old kid rapping and walking down his hallway inside the house. And it's like, we're looking inside condition of the house because someone posted about it. But we also use like social media to find out if the person's sick. I lost my job. I got my job back. It's like, whoa, wait, this is why I defaulted, and putting the pieces together and saying, wow, this is awesome. Now we know why they defaulted, because the idea is to buy this note and get it performing, right? We're not looking to foreclose on it. We don't want to, because our bigger returns is if we can get that thing from a non-performer, or buying it as a non-performer and flipping it to a performer, and maybe, we've gotten 40-50% annual returns on deals because we flipped it to a performing situation.
right. Like sometimes people think that foreclosure is great, but it's really not. Not neither is it
No,
for the bank, for the owner, nobody. It's the
no.
worst case scenario. It's really comes down to nobody took action and nobody tried to resolve the issue. So the worst case scenario is a foreclosure. And
Yes,
so you guys with the notes, right? So you really are trying to get it back to performing. That's really the goal,
yes,
right? You don't want to
yes.
kick anybody out. Now you
Nope.
mentioned something interesting. So going back to it, like, so there's an agent will go out, take a picture, and there's somebody mowing the lawn. So you're like, okay, there's somebody's living there. So how does that work when you buy this note, right? That somebody's living there, they haven't been paying mortgage, and they're not going to, right? They don't have a job. It's not that they don't want to; they just literally have no income coming in to pay for this. So how does that play out, right? How does this
So
not
what?
due diligence?
Sure. So what we do is we'll typically, because when you're in a due diligence period, you cannot reach out to the borrower and ask any questions. You're not supposed to be contacting the borrower at all. What you do is once you you purchase the loan, which is basically you're wiring money, and they send that hard collateral files, which is actual written ink paper, to yourself or whoever's holding the collateral file. What
Got
we
it.
do then is we use our servicer, who's like a property manager. It's the same kind of role. They're in between us and the borrower, and we go ahead and we ask them to contact the borrower through phone calls, emails, and or door knocks, and just get a hold of the borrower. And most of the time, they're either scared because they haven't paid a payment in a year, and they're nervous. Um, so we try doing a hello, welcome, a hello, friendly hello,
Got it.
and just get them on the phone and say, "Hey, tell us your story."
Right. Right.
And
Right.
and
How can we
usually it's
help?
like, yeah, how can we make this work for you? And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't, right? Um, I dropped my income. I used to make 50 grand a year. Now I'm making 20. Well, I don't know if I can help you there,
Right.
right? But hey, listen, I broke, I don't have any much money. I got my job back. I haven't paid a year. I owe, $6,000, $7,000. I don't have the money for it. Well, why don't we do this? And we can make an option because we bought it cheap enough in our bid calculator to figure out, hey, listen, if we take down $1,000, make a modification, and go from there. So we move that market to, hey, listen, well, how can we make this borrower work and make sure our internal numbers work? I see one of the questions from Tammy is, the average cost for property manager service. So we're not typically hiring a property manager. We call them
Right.
servicers, right?
So
Same
what is it? What is a
difference.
servicer? So, right. So we have a mortgage, right? And a mortgage consists of a servicer and plus a note, right? So who's a servicer and like so meaning management you called it before.
Yep.
What does that mean?
So property manager services is the same thing as a servicer in our world. So if you have a mortgage, if you know someone with a mortgage, like your own house, you typically make a payment to what their servicer. You're not paying the bank directly. It's a third party person that collects the money and interacts with you, sends you the payments, a dial-in phone number, and everything else. So that servicer, just like a property manager, collects the payments, deals with phone calls, deals with issues. That's their role. They will contact the lender and say, hey, listen, we have the borrower. This is what they're looking to do. And we'll get their financial information and say, okay, here's their tax returns. Here's their bank account numbers, amounts. Here's, 3 months of bank. And we see what their financial situation is, because the worst thing you want to do is put them back in the same situation they were and have them default. It just doesn't make sense for us and delay the inevitable. If you're not going to perform, you have to foreclose. You're stuck, because if
Right.
you let them paying, there's different rules. They can file bankruptcy and stop the foreclosure. And you just don't want to get there if you don't have to. So the cost typically
Right.
ranges from between, if it's performing, you can get $15 a month, $30 a month, where it just stays. You're paying it. The money goes from the borrower to the servicer, and they cut you a check for the difference. And then If it's non-performing, it can jump up to 90, 95, $100 a month because they're doing the borrower outreach. They're also managing the notes on the file, and handling all the intricacies of that. They're going back and forth with the borrower and whatnot. So it ranges from 15 to 30 for performing, and then it can go from like 60 to 95, depending on the servicer you work with. Some servicers are more willing to let you use your own people. Others want to use everyone they have and kind of separate you from any working with it. As you're newer, sometimes it's helpful. When you're more experienced, you want to use your attorney for foreclosing. You don't want to use theirs. You want to reach out to the borrower, which you're legally allowed to. I just don't recommend people doing that because it's difficult. Because in due diligence, you desire to find out the borrower's story, but
Right.
you really shouldn't because there's laws against reaching out to the debtor, CFPD, that is dangerous because it's illegal to call someone up in a different hour of the day, call them at work, speak to someone who doesn't own the debt. So the different costs are implied. So
Right.
the average cost in a deal in a typical month is typically your servicer, and if you're holding collateral somewhere. But while it's doing that, there's no additional costs except for if there's no insurance in the property, right? When you get a loan for property, you have to have homeowner's insurance. Well, if you're not paying your mortgage payment, more than likely you're not paying
That's
your
not getting
insurance
paid.
payment. You also have to pay your insurance payment, and then you also have to pay property taxes, right? If the borrower's not paying that, you got to make sure you pay that or go to tax sale. So your due diligence is a lot of intricacies. Just like you're buying a property, you need to know what you're buying and all the details that go along with it, because you're taking on a property and all the problems with it. So it's your collateral file. It's knowing the borrower. If you can dive in and find the borrower's problem and you know the issue,
Right.
maybe they're deceased, maybe they died,
Right.
maybe there's a problem with the property.
Now,
We've
would a
had
service provider know these things, or not really?
no,
Yeah.
no, it's all on you to figure out. They're once you buy the loan, like property manager, then they take over, right? The property manager won't help you find a property, and they may if they're agents, but typically they're not going to let you. They're not going to do the work for you. Due diligence is on you to figure out, and work with others to figure out what you feel is best value, and
Right.
then put it through a calculator, figure out.
Dave, that's awesome. So I just want to recap. So that's kind of the
Sure.
simple terms. A homeowner is going to a closing table. He's going to buy a property. The mortgage is going to get put in place. So whenever he's going out to a bank, the bank says, "Hey, I'll give you money for this property." All the numbers work. You got to put down X amount of money to purchase it. Now you're closing it. Now there is a service provider that is assigned to this, and a mortgage provider as well. Now this mortgage note can be sold to another bank and another bank, another bank. You have no control of that as an owner, right? So pretty much, but you do have one servicer who is providing all this work for you, meaning he's making sure that the taxes are being paid, the insurance is being paid, deducted from the mortgage itself. And you mentioned something like there's some times it's not performing, meaning the mortgage is not being paid for, right? Am I correct?
Correct.
So if it's not being paid for, guess what? Somebody has to pay for, make sure the loan is being is taken care of, and that's why you said it goes up, right? Servicer is, charges a higher payments because as a management company, they have to do more managing of the property to make sure it doesn't look like it's abandoned, and the block doesn't look empty, and the neighborhood stays active, right? Because you want to make sure that your neighbor's fair market value stays strong in your house.
Sure. Yes.
So let's talk about so the notes, right? How does the note, let's say, it lands on your table, right? So you have this portfolio and it lands on your table and you're about to buy it, and we're talking about due diligence. What type of time frame are you looking at, right? Before and after, it landed on your lap. What does that mean? Time
So
frame.
let me back up just 1 second and just explain. There's a mortgage and there's a note, two different instruments, right? A mortgage is what gets assigned to the lien on the property that gets recorded in the county records. The
Got it.
note's a promissory, which is the debt, the IOU. So those two instruments, the mortgage gets recorded, the note does not. That's the terms, the interest rates, and everything else, right? You get that you make an offer on the asset list you receive, and you typically have a week to make that offer. Typically, the faster you get in, the better you are. Once you receive the yes from the seller saying, I like your bid, I agree to it, you're going to get the soft collateral, electronic collateral file. You
Got it.
typically, if you're buying one loan, right, if you're a newbie getting in, you're buying one loan, you typically have 5 to 7 days to do your analysis, which
Hmm.
means you're going to get that collateral file checked. You're going to run values. You're going to check a condition. We have a whole list of about 13 items that we have to evaluate. Make
Right.
sure there's a title policy on the property. If
Right.
there's no title, you can't prove the fact that there's no other liens that maybe from 25 years ago.
Right.
Because our lien check is usually just from the current owner on, knowing that the title policy protects everything prior. So we get that information. We're also looking at the fact that, valuing the property, getting the BPO, getting the drive-by. So all this happens within the 5 days. Once you go through it and you find that property you thought was worth 60 is now worth 20, 45. Hey, I see a problem with the roof, it's worth 40. We go back to the seller and say, here's our numbers. Our new bid is X. If the
We
seller
say
says,
we say
yep,
seller, the note holder, right? The current note
yes,
holder, right? Mhm.
correct. Yep, the current owner of the debt. So the current owner of the debt says, nope, I disagree. Or, hey, our attorney or our collateral review company has said that we're missing an assignment on this thing. So we
Right.
have assignments and launches, and the assignment follows one and the launch follows the other. So it's the chain of the original owner down to whoever owns it now, the originator to the current owner. And if that chain is broken, you need to make sure that the originator is connected down to the current seller. Because if not, we don't know if that connection is there. How do we? The courts won't let you foreclose on something that you can't prove you own the debt on.
Wow.
So that chain has to be happening.
And
So
you're 5 to 7 days. You all of this is happening within 5 7 days. That is very.
typically, and if you are newer and you're working with a smaller seller, they will flex that kind of stuff.
Right.
We normally when we get an offer in, we'll accept an offer and we'll give you 5 to 7 days. But the biggest thing is I would suggest is stay in touch with the seller, right? If hey, I sent my BPO, they sent me 5 days. Can you give me an extra couple days? No problem. Communication is huge, and networking is huge, right? Just know the fact that oftentimes finding out the data and getting information is usually the hardest part. But reach out to other investors who've done this before and ask questions. It's amazing the knowledge out there, and we all have different experiences.
Awesome, awesome. So for somebody who's starting off, would they be able to reach out to you and see how you,
Absolutely.
and do you do like partnerships, or how do you really like how do you work, and how do you structure your things moving forward?
Sure, sure. We have a ton of free resources. We've YouTube channel and stuff like that. We kind of done a ton of webinars like this one where we brought other people on, ask questions. We provide services, and we also ask questions in different groups that we run. But they can definitely reach out to us, check our sites, and get all the information. We don't do JV deals. We're very careful with that. That's been a big hot topic. People doing JVs with money
And
because yeah, JVs, typically JVs is that I go to you, you have the money, you JV with me. We've had people get sued by states that SEC gets in and says, listen, you raised funds, you didn't JV, and they see it as a capital raise. So we did a webinar with somebody who did that, and he raised some money, and even though that person had the money and he did the deal, they were seen as raising capital. So it's just a dangerous world to get into. So we have our own capital, we buy our own deals, but we definitely can help other people get into it. And we try to help because we rather you learn instead of bidding crazy numbers, get the deal and then lose. It's stupid for it to get involved.
right.
And sellers then go, well, I can get so much more money for this because someone made a crazy offer because they just don't know. I would say my biggest tip is run your numbers projected based on what return you're looking for versus percentage of BPO or UPB is a big number, which is unpaid principal balance, is what's owed on the debt, right? People say, well, what's your percentage of UPB? My factor is like you don't get that money returned, so figure what you want to bid on it based on the returns, and then say, okay, I'm at 70% of whatever that number is of the UPB is your byproduct of your bid. But that due diligence period can get confusing. You lean on your people who have more knowledge, your attorneys,
Right.
your agents, your experienced people to give you the numbers. But ultimately, you should form your own checklist as you learn. You're not going to always be right, but this is a huge education course, just like real estate. You can take all the courses in the world, but doing is a different.
I agree with you 100% because that's pretty much where I had to go through myself.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's better to use other people's experience, right? Their pitfalls and so forth, because it's very expensive, right? Experience is something you have to pay for. You cannot buy it. It continues to have to pay for it and continues to grow, and that's why network is your net worth. It's definitely strong to reach out to make sure you have some like Dave Putz in your Rolodex that you can reach out and talk to him. So yeah, so what's some of the experience through your experience, some of the negative things or pitfalls, or some things that you happened to you that you would, for example, let's say if you're starting off in this business, right? What are the certain things that you wouldn't do now that you did before?
Um, I was very scared about networking. I thought I could do it all myself. I definitely recommend doing that. I would lean on the others who've had the experience that I may not. I would also, what I always tell people is, don't ask for mentorships. Thanks, Bill. Don't lean on mentorships. I would say is go ahead and um, offer a service to somebody that is experienced that you're really good at. Maybe you're good with computers. Maybe you're good at whatever. And say, listen, I can help you with. I'm an accountant. I can help you with your accounting stuff if you teach me this. And borrow systems because we get many, many, many people, who you say, hey, can I mentorship? Give me some in return, and I'm more willing to help you out. We've
Yeah,
had programmers call me up and say, hey, listen, I'll do a programming for you if you teach me this. Awesome. It's free for me, free for you, and we share information. And
yeah,
it usually works in the best relationship versus, hey, share information with me.
right. Yeah, one hand washes the other.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's helpful to do that. And most people in the space are really great people. Bill Grisman made a comment. He's also another guy in the space. It just the space is so small. Just reach out and talk to people. Join as many groups and talk to many people as you can. We have our experiences. Other people have their own. I would, we have a Facebook group. We have Facebook pages. We have YouTube stuff. There's a lot of free material out there. Just get involved, ask questions, and just learn from it.
It's interesting. You're providing a lot of free educational things if you're really posting on YouTube and so forth. And some people are always wondering, well, why are you doing it? And you pointed it out. You don't want the newbie, your competitor in the future, to start overbidding, right? He's gonna lose money, but he's wasting your time. He's wasting the banks. He's wasting a lot of people's time. And like you said before, foreclosure is the last thing to do, right? It's the worst case scenario. And a lot of newbies don't understand that, and they can just overbid things. And I've seen it, like my background is e-commerce, and I'll see new guys come in and they're willing to, 5% or something, but they're not taking consideration of, refunds, returns,
Yeah.
all these other things that come into the business that when you're a newbie, you don't really see them. You just see, oh my God, I'm about to make this X amount of money. And another great thing you pointed out is focus on what the return you want, right? You said, don't look at, these numbers, that numbers. So how does a person come up with their number, right? How did you come up with your returns? And like, that's something you go by and you stand by.
It's hard to do. It took years and years and years of rebuilding, reverse engineering calculations using IRR and stuff like that, taking your expenses. And, we've added to it throughout the years. My basic one, 2012 was terrible. We bought loans and worked through it. So we're willing to help everyone get to that point, but we hate to give out calculators because you don't understand how ours works. And if
Right.
you use it and you have to adjust it, you have no clue how to adjust it.
Mm.
Right. So it's difficult to say, here's mine, take and run with it, because you don't know how it built. You don't know the functionality of it. And that sometimes worse than actually building your own. Um, it's interesting that most people, that's one of the first things they ask for is, how do I figure out my bid number? And I don't have an easy answer for you. All I say is reverse engineer your ROIs, your yield, the maturities, your XIRR, IRR, and say, okay, I want to make a 10% return. Here's what I got to figure out. And
Got it.
run your numbers and play with it and look at stuff. And ask, hey guys, I'm done to bid on this. What do you guys think of it? Where am I off on this thing?
Yeah.
So Bill asked a question about XIRR. So XIR is basically a very formalized number figuring out when a time period happens of different amounts. ROI is the income divided by your expenses. It's a flat number. It doesn't take account of any kind of time period. If it's 1 year or 10 years or 15 years, yield of maturity is saying, I'm going to make this return every year for 20 years. And most people don't hold loans that long.
Got it.
Well, IRR is saying, I'm going to make this payment and I may sell the loan in 3 years. Well, XIRR tells me I'm going to buy it now. I'll receive this much money. Maybe I take a lump sum done from a borrower and I make this much money a month. And after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, I'm going to resell it and I'm going to sell it for X yield to maturity or IRR and say, okay, I'm going to make that. What do I have to buy it at to make sure this number makes sense if I sell in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years? So XIRR and IRR takes into account every month's payment. If it goes up and down,
Hmm.
most of the time ours are flat across the world. We can't flat across the board because we can't figure out if the borrower will make exact payments a month. We calculate the fact that if they continue to make those payments, and what we do in our bid calculator is say, what is the worst case scenario? Is it the fact that we hold this thing and it performs? Is it foreclosure? And we say, is it selling at auction? So that's another thing, is that when you sell at auction, you can only sell it or bid what they call credit bidding up to the legal balance. Anything above the legal balance, you have to bring your capital, because I may be owed 50 grand. I may be in the deal for 10. I am owed 50, but I can't bid 60 at the auction without bringing an extra 10 grand, because I'm technically only in the deal for as much as the debt to me is. So
Right.
if I want to bid 60, I have to put 10 grand up. But if the house is worth 100 and I go to auction and I bid 50, the equity is lost in the auction situation. So what we do is say, okay, if it sells at auction, what's return do we need to have, and what's our bid number based on that, and every scenario down, and say, okay, what's my worst exit in the situation, and if that one works, all the other ones should work.
Right. No, that was a great point. Yeah. It's we're trying to put a entire business, right, an entire industry into 40 minutes. So yeah, you've been dropping a
Yes.
lot of gems, a lot of information. And again, guys, thank you for commenting. Please do ask any questions. Go ahead and just post it. We can answer it now, or even in the future. So definitely appreciate that knowledge. If I have a question for you. If you had to start all over again, right, from the day one, what would you do differently, or would you do it the same?
That's a good question. I would be, if I start all over again, I would be probably leaning on more people in the beginning,
Interesting.
leaning on more people for knowledge, and not leaning on one person. I'd lean on multiple. I'd pick out 3 or 4 people and say, listen, I'm going to pick everyone's brain because they come at a different angle. They have a
Yep.
different method of doing things. I'm all big on automation, where some people are big on doing one thing or another. We all have our strengths. Where my strength is where I'm at, and where someone else's strengths they're going to be at. Maybe they have a legal background, maybe a real estate background. I hate rehabs. That's one thing I can't stand doing. Where I'm going to avoid that at like the plague, where other people have no problem with it.
Right.
So, angling yourself towards the market and finding out different people. And the other thing I would do is get into it, understanding the fact that you're the biggest service providers are your biggest friends in the base. Learn your attorneys, buy dinners, go out there, network with them, give them a phone call and ask questions. You need to know what you can and can't do in situations, instead of just fly by the seat of the pants. Because in certain states, you need to have a debt license to buy the debt. If you don't, you go to foreclosure, they can say, listen, your debt's not worth it because you don't own a debt license. You legally cannot file foreclosure because you don't own a debt license in Illinois.
Oh,
You
wow.
can be stopped. So
Wow.
certain states have different rules of who can collect debt
Which goes
in
back.
that state.
Yeah, you got to make sure that now, if you do get struck with that, can you partner up with somebody that could, or it's like,
Yep.
oh, once paperwork is done, is done.
So it depends on the situation. Each state has different rules, right? Certain states only allow a few. Some states, the company has to be a debt collector license, and that may be 4 or 5 grand a year to hold that license. Well, if you're buying a $50,000 property, you're going to make 3 grand. It doesn't make sense. So we have a list of states, and it continuously changes, especially with the coronavirus going on. Certain states are changing the debt license requirements and saying, like California is constantly changing what we can or can't do there. Maryland changed back and forth for a while, knowing what states you can buy debt in. And if you don't buy debt correctly, you can get yourself in more trouble. And borrowers hire attorneys, and those attorneys figure out, hey, how can I get this foreclosure wiped out? And that's the angles and making that connections and joining conferences like this to learn from what other people do.
Awesome.
So
So speaking about phone, picking up the phone, calling somebody, can somebody reach out to you? What is the best way to reach out? I'm gonna go ahead and put up. So is this pretty much the best way to get a hold of you? And
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. Shoot me an email. We have a lot going on. Our trade desk, right now, we have a bunch of loans we're selling, but I would reach out to us or trade desk at JKP Holdings. We we have all kinds of stuff that's going on all the time. We're looking to help people. We just don't want you guys to bid numbers. Our sellers expect that value to be real up there, and we put our bid in there and like, well, we got offers last week of this much money, and saying, well, they're gonna be out of the business in a year. Their bid numbers are crazy, and lowers it. So reach out, talk to us, check us out on all different social medias. We're willing to help you. We just want to make sure that you do things as best as we can help you with. But understand that we don't want to give away everything for free, because our knowledge is expensive, and because of time. But I would definitely say is reach out, talk to us, and lean on those who've done this space for a long time.
got it. Awesome. So again, Dave, Putz, thank you for coming out. This is definitely the last time we see you. We'll definitely do another interview sometime soon. And again, please reach out to David, and hope to hear from you guys. And again, whatever questions you have, do reach out and answer them. All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Great. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, yeah. You can prep for the session.